Looking ahead to midnight, and Alexei Sayle is back in business, turning his talents in newscasting in big city. But now Trevor MacDonald is at ITN. You're watching Carlton. It's 10 o'clock.
From ITN, News at 10 with Trevor MacDonald.
Fears for President Boris Yeltsin after another heart attack. Now brain disease claims first teenage victims. Desperate search for a village buried in the snow. And the first look inside an ancient Egyptian tomb. Good evening. President Boris Yeltsin is back in hospital tonight with a recurrence of the heart trouble he had in July. The Kremlin is insisting that the president is still in charge, but his condition doesn't inspire great optimism that he'll return to work quickly. Mr. Yeltsin is 64. Only 2 days ago, he returned to Russia from a visit to the United States, which is said to have exhausted him. Over now to Moscow and to our correspondent, Julian Mannion.
Here in Moscow tonight, Kremlin insiders have been meeting to try to assess the impact of Boris Yeltsin's latest heart attack. There are clearly the same concerns that surfaced in July, and once again, the political future of this great country looks uncertain. Tonight, limousines with special Kremlin license plates have visited the hospital where Boris Yeltsin is suffering the effects of his second heart attack this year. The cars are believed to have brought senior government officials to Yeltsin's bedside after the Russian president was rushed to the clinic by helicopter.
Today, in the afternoon, President didn't feel good, and he, at the recommendation of his doctors, he has been taken to the hospital.
It's just 3 days since Yeltsin appeared with Bill Clinton in New York and gave robust answers to reporters' questions.
Well, now for the first time I can tell you that you're a disaster.
But Yeltsin has now suffered what is described as an attack of myocardial ischemia, a lowering of blood supply to the muscles of the heart, or in plain man's language, a heart attack. On Monday, Yeltsin appeared frail as President Clinton helped him up the steps to their meeting. And it was perhaps significant that cameras were barred from recording the Russian president's return to Moscow airport, which was marked only by a brief announcement on the news. Kremlin officials are now stressing that President Yeltsin's life is not in danger, but one of his closest aides says that he is not optimistic that Yeltsin will be able to return to work in the near future. Experts are predicting that he may not be able to run in next year's elections.
If this continues to develop and his disease is not cured, definitely he will not be a candidate, or he will not be someone who will be regarded as a possible candidate for the next presidential election.
For now, the Kremlin is insisting that Yeltsin remains in command, and the Prime Minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin, has pointedly said that he will not be changing his work schedule. If Boris Yeltsin is incapacitated or dies, it is Viktor Chernomyrdin who will take over for a transitional period. Elections must follow within 3 months, and other leading contenders would be Grigory Yavlinsky, a pro-market reformer, General Alexander Lebed, a former army commander and popular hardliner, and Gennady Zyuganov, boss of the Communist Party, which has performed strongly in recent local elections. The world and Viktor Chernomyrdin will now have to wait and see if Boris Yeltsin can make the same kind of recovery that he did in July, or if this is finally the end of his historic presidency.
Slightly conflicting assessments from Moscow. What's your hunch about whether Mr. Yeltsin will return to work?
Well, of course, it is far too early to say. On the one hand, we have the Kremlin insisting that Boris Yeltsin is in fact in better shape than after his previous heart attack in July. On the other hand, we have a comment that they made which has some gloomy implications, and that is that the problem he's faced is the great fatigue and strain that he experienced in this recent trip to the United States. Now, the problem, of course, is that kind of trip is really the essence of a modern political leader's routine. It's something that he simply has to do. The old alternative of retiring into the Kremlin and closing the door, as in Soviet times, really probably no longer exists. So the question now is, how much longer can President Boris Yeltsin go on performing those duties?
You mentioned Mr. Chernomyrdin. Now, if he has to take over for however long or short a time, could you spell out for us what you think the implications for the West would be?
Well, on the face of it, and it's still, of course, very early to dismiss President Yeltsin, but on the face of it, Viktor Chernomyrdin would be a reassuring, safe pair of hands. He has emerged as very pro-reform, as pro-business. The problem, on the other hand, is that he is not an elected politician. He remains an appointed Prime Minister. He has never experienced, at least until now, a direct election himself. And the question is really whether he would be any good at it. And the problem here is that if there is another round of presidential elections following, let us suppose the departure of President Yeltsin, would Viktor Chernomyrdin succeed in reassuring the public, or would somebody more extreme find the door open for them?
Julian Mannion, thank you. President Yeltsin's ill health threw the Commons into confusion here today.
The odd shower here or there. The weekend looks pretty good. Plenty of dry, warm weather to come. Here's a summary.
For a detailed forecast, call Weather Update, sponsored by First Choice Holidays on 0891 11 0000.